devastating to think about how the images of self-worth often retroactively investigate the kernels of a personality's core, and that leaves a diffused array of wonderment, I do suppose, within the solar plexus that does not go away unless the requisite brittle forms of ambiance can come together and act as a kind of lithographic dance horizon that makes everything into nothing on one scale. So maybe a person looking from the outside in would understand immediately why someone like myself has difficulty in grasping with his myriad emotions, because there's always this logical, linguistic surface that bubbles up and that I always desire to express, even to myself, and I'm having trouble finding the right outlets to purvey my unique strengths. Now, maybe part of the issue is with the inherited language games that has become an aspect of my substrate while instilling my own serfdom and panorama of concepts in this tangent of time. But other than that, I can think that there are many avulsions, aversions, incinerations, retransmogrifications that occur throughout reality, life, and the universe, which are imperceptible to us, but not necessarily unrecorded on all layers. And so this is a kind of speculation out loud, but I'm becoming more and more interested in the concepts that I stumble across within the field of physics, just to think how many of dimensions of matter and time there hypothetically could be, and how many categories of matter, ambiance, gas, and flow might spring like brigadiers silently from the dark abyss coves that mortal man, in most probability, does not lay his eyes upon. So maybe that's why it's much safer to concoct caricatures of life itself, so that the children of imagination act advertently as a kind of middleman between the siftless, seamless perceptual apparatus and the ideals which they might assumedly protrude towards into the ether horizon, vertical flow, geometrical atmospheres, which can be penetrated and pushed through, I do imagine, with enough recollection of will and harboring of various tensions that can be together in all the various colors, which are the symptoms of deep, rich, and nigh ephemeral feeling. So, in other words, it's not necessarily true that a person would have to read XYZ literature so much as to acquaint themselves with certain abstract, visceral analogues of the insights and lessons which can be deduced from so-called classical works of instinct and coordination, which pertain to a vivid value selection process that takes place in varying degrees of articulation from the mind and positions of perhaps atoms in the spine. Who precisely knows? And it is within that decoupage of ambiguity that I, as a philosopher, also often appreciate the clinging there too, because within those fractal reasons of dynamic evolution, which takes place organically as the dialogue between organic and inorganic matters are concerned, what more than this is the essence, definition, or primordial crux of philosophical inclination prior to the crystallization of any given dogmas, ideologies, or sophisticated intentionalities as concerns going beyond the very basic core of what survival requires. And so surpassing that point is quite possibly what it means to be human, but not what is mandatory for the amalgamation of meaning to take place if a person is, wildly eccentric, extremely introverted, an outsider of magnanimously literate proportions, who does not see it wise to indenture the phantasmagorical proclivities of observation within him to mesh with the institutions. In other words, the more magnanimous, the less monocled should be the satisfactory ideal situation of the ordeal, which involves abilities cohesively and diffusely ejecting their panoramas within cycles of thought emblems that merge with the impetus and murkiness of experience to have an insight into the gratitude and exactitude of these forces, which can be perceived to be intertwined, or hybridizations of one's ability to decipher and address the notion of 2 and 2 equaling 4. So, within every statement or thought, it seems to me, there are implicit webs of rule-binding impulses and guidance systems which form components of the known, visible, tangible, most worthily direct personalities, which can then, from various centrifugal centers of cocoon-like hibernation, which have their intervals of time in which the incubation of ideas is imperative beyond the bearing of crosses into population dynamics, which essentially means performing the functions of the phantom known as society, which is simultaneously all pervasive and non-existent except insofar as the invocation personally of the status quo is concerned, insofar as it is true that each life organism helps to make the world, insofar as the world is perceivable by creatures who have a relationship to it, whether or not the dialectic attributions of said phenomena in the circulation of life dynamics is bestowed with adequate vocabulary, or is locked away in a safe never to be seen.